Welcome to DABEL Tech Talks. My name is Dale Bondanza, and my company is DAB Enterprises, LLC. We offer VCIO, that's virtual or fractional, CIO consulting services to help companies obtain their next tier of success despite the forces set against them through a passionate focus on people, process, and technology in that order. I have with me today our special guest for our pilot episode of DABEL Tech Talks. And I'll put his picture here on the screen and do a little intro for him. So Mr. Derrick Butts is the CEO and founder of Continuums Strategies. Continuums Strategies helps businesses manage cybersecurity as a predictable risk. They work with CXOs and IT teams to improve their cyber resilience and security posture through addressing gaps in business continuity planning and security risk management strategies. Over the last 7 years, Derrick has been a guest, speaker, panelist, presenter for ISC2 Security Congress and other venues discussing cybersecurity professional development and cyber risk management strategies across a variety of business cultures. In 2021, Derrick was recognized by Security Magazine as one of the top cybersecurity leaders. And in 2020, he was recognized by SC Magazine, that's cybersecurity, media, as one of the top chief security officers of the year. So I'm very honored to have Derrick with us today. So I will let Derrick do a little intro for himself if there's anything I missed there.
Morning, Dale. Thanks very much for having me on. I greatly appreciate it. And no, you covered everything as far as my background and experience. I do greatly appreciate that. It's been a whirlwind, but it's been all good. Cybersecurity is one of those things that's never a dull moment because it's always changing.
I understand. That's great. So today's topic, which we're going to dive right into, so thanks for going over that, Derrick. So in our pilot episode, when it comes to technology, I always think cybersecurity first when I think of technology as a CIO and as an executive IT leader. So I really appreciate you being on today. We're going to talk about zero trust and what that means. But I got to start with more of a lighthearted question, Derrick, and I didn't even prep you for this one, but it's just something I was thinking about as I was preparing our agenda for this morning. Did you get a lot of razzing in high school based on your last names?
No, not too much. There were other last names were a little bit more unique than mine, so it was definitely different.
I wasn't sure with a name like Butts if you got a lot of razzing, so that's why I smile every time I say it. I think it's great. So thanks. So Derrick, what exactly is zero trust, and what does that mean in the context of a technology organization?
So zero trust is more of a methodology or a framework, and what it really is looking at is really looking at all your users, your devices, and any type of applications to really authenticate whether they're inside the organization or outside the organization, to really authenticate who they are. Are they authorized to be on your network? And if they are, once they do authenticate, they have to continuously validate their security configurations and also their posture and the fact they are still authorized to be on your network. And this is important because networks today, they're either contained or they're global. And no matter where that person may be, you want to make sure whoever the person or device is part of your network, and you've actually allowed them or granted them access to be part and access your data. And that's really a key part.
Okay, great. Thank you for that explanation. So if I'm the head of technology for my organization or the CIO, what steps would I need to, where do I even start? What steps do I need to implement a zero trust framework?
Well, when you look at zero trust, like I said, you have to kind of meet the customer where they are. Most customers are either still on premise or they're kind of hybrid between they have part of their information in the cloud and part of their information on the data center. When you're looking at zero trust, it's really more of a zero trust type architecture. And I say this because when you look at zero trust, all the components within your network or architecture need to support a zero trust type service. And let me give you an example. I used to do a lot of high availability network designs back in the day. And high availability was something they were looking at least 5 to 6 nines of availability, which means that network had to be able to withstand and not go down more than like 5 seconds at any particular time within a month. So when you look at that, we used to look at the criteria like every single component within that network then had to have a high availability standard. What that meant was the availability we looked at as mean time between failures, MTBF, had to have a high number. So we would look at a 6-year mark, which usually be over 11 to 12,000 hours per device. So when you look at it from that regard, every single entity had to have that same level of MTBF in order to be considered high availability services. Well, it's no different with zero trust. When you're looking at zero trust architecture, every component, every aspect of it has to be part of that zero trust environment and methodology. So you look at zero trust architecture is going to help you design a zero trust network access type service. And what that means is really looking at how that person is going to get into the network, when they get to the network, of how they're going to be authorized to be on the network, where they have privileges to go, and the services they're going to have access to or applications they're going to have access to. So I kind of look at it in 5 steps. There are customers that have want to go zero trust is kind of the goals of a lot of CEOs today. The problem is their network infrastructure does not support, as I mentioned, all the different components of having that zero trust basis to be able to support a zero trust architecture. So the ideal zero trust implementation, I would really look at deploying what you call a safety type network. And this is a secure access service edge type network. And what this is all software designed as a service. So it's a service designed WAN, wide area network, which allows the networks to really kind of pinpoint and get the education, the security services out to the end user. And I say this because most services, when you're talking about access, they usually use a VPN, a virtual private network. With a lot of that use them back to a data center. The problem is now the data centers can be pretty much in any country. With the SASE network, or the service access edge, service edge, allows that user then to connect and authenticate at a closer point. Because now with that type of SASE type service, that end user can really then authenticate closer to where they are. So when you look at that, there's really kind of 5 components that would take place. One is designing this SASE type network as an endpoint solution. And this would really allow you to kind of centralize your cloud services as a native type services, no matter if you're located here in the US or located abroad. It really doesn't matter because these networks can be deployed globally. You look at the integration of the services to make sure it's kind of seamless in the way your infrastructure and services are designed, but also every single component in this SASE network is going to have a zero trust component or element to it. That's going to be key. It's going to also help with things as far as presenting breaches and other type of services. And it's also going to help with containment. The second part of a zero trust design or implementation, we're looking at micro segmentation. So you may have 100 users or 1,000 users on the network. Not everybody needs to have access to the same information or data across that infrastructure. So I may segment HR, I may segment legal, I may segment the IT department, other services throughout the network to smaller zones of containment, which makes it easier to manage when people are looking for access. And also allows the users to really access those applications that they need to get access to a lot quicker. This actually helps with the zero trust network access and authentication type services. The third thing I would recommend is multi-factor authentication. You hear a lot about that.
Yeah.
And multi-factor authentication is really looking at identifying that person and authenticate them as who they are, their accessibility and their authorization to be on your network, but also validates the point of how the point that they have certain privileges to gain access to certain information in your network. And this may be done multi-factors, at least 2 points of authentication. It can be the username and the password as one. It can be username, password, and a PIN for a special code. It can be an access token. It can also be biometrics. It can be using things such as SMS or email type authentication as another way of verifying after you do your initial password and username that this user now would have a further or second point of authentication to say, this is who I am.
Okay.
This is important because we want to make sure these users are authorized to be on the network, but also they can't just get in a single point. The single point of access is one of the things we really try to avoid in a zero trust network. The fourth thing is looking at least privileges. So we call this the principle of least privilege. And what this is really looking at that particular user as they're working to get access to your network. What kind of read-write privileges or access do they have to the data information that may exist within your center? And this is important also. You don't want people from HR accessing payroll data and your payroll people accessing other type of data from legal. So the segmentation and the access and the roles and rules assigned to each individual be based on how they authenticate into the network and what rules and roles they're assigned based on their authentication in the network. The fifth part is really looking at the endpoint. So everybody has to get access to the network on some sort of device. So you need to look at identifying and authenticating that particular device. Is that device, one, authorized to have access to your network? Two, is that device also part of your something that company or business has provided to that individual? Or can they be validated as far as having the credentials needed to access the information on your network through the SASE network? I know this has been a mouthful, but that's kind of 5 different points to kind of look at strategically. And it doesn't happen overnight. These things take time. So usually most companies will do this through a technology refresh, which will allow them to really get all the components throughout the enterprise, ideally set up and aligned to be part of that zero trust architecture and infrastructure.
Great. Well, thank you for that very detailed explanation. That was great. I think the only thing that kind of went over my head a little bit is when you were talking about segmenting the network. I got most of everything else you said, but when you talk about segmenting a network, what is that? How are you actually doing that?
So segmentation is sort of like with today's networks, on a premise, you have VLANs, virtual LAN segmentation. So you're doing the same thing, but in the cloud. So you're authorizing, just like you can set up different security tunnels or VPN tunnels for individual users to have access to certain information. The segmentation is also same along those lines. So I may have, on a wireless network, I may have 5 different access point login type credentials, which I have 5 different access point SSIDs, so secure site identifiers, which means now each one of those segmentation is going to be allowing me to access different parts of the network or data within my infrastructure. The same thing would happen on this AC type network.
Okay. Now, is all this, so you listed 5 points, so that was great. I assume all this is something that your organization can help another organizations set up and establish. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So when you look at zero trust is really part of a cyber resilience strategy. And the resilience strategy is really on the whole scale. So when you look at that, it's really looking at your business risk as well as your security risk and your operational risk. All those come together to create what is my risk factor for my organization. So I look at a zero trust implementation as a segmentation as part of that cyber resilience strategy. And that really goes back into not only just looking at the infrastructure components and how people have access to the network, but also looking at the individuals and the culture of your particular business. So, security awareness training is also part of that cyber resilience, making sure you're educating the people on what they need to do and how to understand what's a phishing email versus a ransomware or malware type contained email. That's all part of the cyber resilience strategy. So when you're really talking about zero trust and implementation, it's funny, I have people call me and I say, well, I just implemented multi-factor authentication. Did I implement zero trust? And I said, not really. You implemented a small piece of it. And although it's good to give you another layer of security, it's not zero trust. All you did was just make it harder for people to get in, but your backend is still kind of open or exposed and doesn't have that zero trust component applied to it.
That's a great point, because that is a common misnomer about MFA is, there's multiple steps to truly get to that point. So I'm glad you made that clarification. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that was great. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up? I think that was a great intro, and I appreciate you coming on for our pilot episode.
Sure thing. Just the only thing, just like you said, when companies are looking at their cyber resilience, they really should look at it as part of the enterprise, because it is not just an IT function. Zero trust is just not an IT department. It's really looking at from the CEO down in the whole business culture, because everybody has to evolve when it comes to zero trust and the zero trust application of methodology. As I mentioned before, I like to do when I design networks for cyber resilience is have multiple layers of the effect. And this really helps to make it harder for the cyber threat actor to kind of get access to your information or data. Because your data is the currency. They're looking to get that so they can exploit it and do other things with it. But I really encourage companies when they're looking at zero trust to really kind of bring in somebody like myself or work with an agency or company that can actually help them look at the entire enterprise and not just look at segmentation or just doing the components. It's really looking at the people in the process and the technologies all working together to create that cyber resilience. My company focuses a lot on the business continuity planning aspect of it, because that also does take into account your operational risk as well as your business risk, and include your security risk, but also then looking at the fact of what are security methodologies you may have and how those may need to be enhanced, because some people may have some services that may already be in place that we can reutilize, but we just need to see how they need to be enhanced to further get to that zero trust level of architecture or that level of security they're trying to reach.
Okay, great. That's excellent, man. Thank you so much. All right, so let me just do a quick wrap up for our folks again. Thank you all for joining our pilot episode of DABEL Tech Talks. My name is Dale Bondanza, and my guest today has been Mr. Derrick Butts from Continuum Solutions. Did I say or Continuum Strategies? I'm sorry. If you have any additional questions for Derrick, please follow up with him directly via LinkedIn or through his company's website. And what is your company's website, Derrick?
It's continuumsstrategies.com. And that's continuums with an S. So CONTINUUMS strategies.com.
Excellent. So thank you again very much for that. And I'm going to end our podcast for today. So thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me, Dale.